So you bow in number 3, and then you come up from the bow after the priest consumes the host. He's standing there making a thanksgiving. Then he uncovers the chalice. He takes the square pawl, linen pawl, off the chalice. That's the server's signal to stand. They will come together, genuflect, and then this server will go over and get the cruet. When you stand and come together, this server will pick up the bell. And they come together, genuflect, and he has the bell. And the other server now, after they genuflected, the other server will just stand here in his place. But the one on this side goes over to the cruet table, puts the bell down, picks up the paten, comes back to his place, they genuflect, and they go up at an angle and kneel on the top. Again, leaving a space between them for the priest to genuflect. So now this server has the paten. If you're not going to be receiving communion at that Mass, just kneel one step down, like on the step below the top platform. Then the priest knows you're not going to be receiving communion. The priest says after he consumes the precious blood, the servers bow, a bow number 3, and then right after he brings the chalice down from having consumed the precious blood, the servers recite the Confiteor. They remain bowed. They recite the Confiteor, striking their breast, etc. And then there's the Misereatur, the Indulgentiam. You say Amen after each. Then the priest holds up the host and says the Ecce Agnus Dei and the Domini non sum dignus 3 times. There's no ring of the bell this time. Bell's on the cruet table. That was for the priest's Domini non sum dignus. So he holds up the host, says the Ecce Agnus Dei, the Domini non sum dignus, and then he gives you Holy Communion, and the paten is passed from one server to the other. Now, after you receive communion, the priest is going to go distribute communion to the people. And the servers will wait till after he leaves, and the server that doesn't go with him for the paten, one server will go with the priest holding the paten. The other will come down, genuflect, and go to his place. Now, different chapels, different priests may have a different custom. I have recently said we will have the second server take the paten and go with the priest. So, because he ends up with the paten to receive communion. Some places will have this server pass it back to the first server and he goes with the priest. Regardless, the remaining server will go down, genuflect in the middle, go to his place, kneel on the step, and make his thanksgiving. The server that takes the paten will be very careful to hold it all the way under the chin, not too close so it doesn't touch the chin, not too far away, not too far down, but under the chin. In case a particle of the host falls, or the host itself, the paten will then catch the Blessed Sacrament. After he's done, the priest takes the paten. When the priest goes up to the altar, the server that held the paten can genuflect behind him and then go to his place and kneel down. So now the servers are back in their normal places on the bottom step, and the priest purifies the paten, either hands it back to the server or puts it on the side of the altar. He reposes the ciborium into the tabernacle. We bow here. When he opens the tabernacle, you hear the tabernacle close. You come up from your bow. You stand, come together, genuflect, and then both servers go over here to get the cruets. Now, they'll take the same cruets they took the first time. Acolyte number 1, or the epistle side server, has the wine. Acolyte number 2 has the water. But there's this difference. This time you're going to be pouring. So you're holding the cruets by the handle. And you're not going to be kissing the cruet because you're not giving it to the priest. You're pouring. So now the servers have the cruets, and they'll go up and stand, as they did at the offertory, one step down from the top. The server with the wine will go right up to the side of the priest when he's ready for the wine. And I'll show you, the priest is facing the altar. He will hold the chalice out a little bit, angle it towards the server to indicate he's ready to receive the wine. So then this server will come up next to the priest, pour wine into the chalice, and then turn and go back to his place. He will remember when he pours the wine, it should not come gushing out, but it should not be a bare trickle. It should come out in a steady stream. He will pour it, and I've pointed this out to you before, so the chalice is here. The priest holds the chalice. He will pour the wine such that it will flow down to the bottom but don't pour it directly into the bottom lest it splash out. So he will pour it onto the side of the chalice, right here onto the side, and then the priest will elevate the chalice slightly when he wants to indicate that's enough to stop. So the server holds it maybe about an inch above the top of the chalice. The cruet shouldn't touch the side of the chalice, but it should also not be held well above the chalice, or you're going to have the splashing of the wine. So he pours the wine in, then the server will go back to his place, and now the servers are here. Now when the first acolyte with the wine is going to come up, depending where you're standing here on the step, this server, acolyte number 2, may need to step to the side a little bit to let this server pass. Then once he comes to his place, he can step up next to him. And now the priest comes over to the side with his fingers, holding the chalice with his fingers and with the thumb and index fingers inside the cup of the chalice, like this. And he comes over here, and first is the wine cruet, the server with the wine cruet pours wine over the priest's fingers into the chalice. He usually will not take very much wine, a little bit of wine, elevates his fingers a little bit, you stop pouring. Then the server with the water will pour. Now once again, don't hold the cruet well above the fingers. It should be about an inch above the fingers, and he will take much more water than he took wine in order to purify the chalice. And he'll elevate his fingers a little bit. Then the servers will bow number 2 to the priest, turn towards one another, come back down, replace their cruets on the cruet table, put the stoppers in the cruets, and now, so after presenting the cruets, now the servers will come together back to the middle. So here's number 2, here's number 1. They came back to the middle, hands folded, they have nothing in their hands. They turn to the altar, genuflect, and then turn to the sides, and they will come around. And as they come around the sides, they will both go up the side steps, and acolyte number 2 is going to pick up the book. Acolyte number 1 is going to get the folded chalice veil. And I would ask you, don't unfold the chalice veil or refold it. Just leave it the way the priest has it. Just simply pick it up, and you will come down. Once you pick up your things, the book, chalice veil, you come down at an angle to your places. So you'll come back to where you were together, turn towards the altar, genuflect together, and then this server will step back just a little bit. He's the acolyte number 1. He's the one that has the chalice veil. Acolyte number 2, who has the book, goes first. At an angle, he will go up here and place the book on the side of the altar here, straight. Just like it was at the beginning of the Mass for the introit, it's facing straight. It's not at an angle. And then acolyte number 2, after they've genuflected, always allow the one with the book to go first. Then he will go up at an angle to the other side, and he will lay down the veil, which is folded. He will lay it down on that side. All right, now my diagram is all marked up here. Let me draw the steps a little bit again. Okay, so they set these things down, and then they turn to the outside, and then just simply after this one sets the book down, he'll turn that way, this one will turn that way. They already genuflected before they put the things up there. So they simply go around to their places, and our custom here, according to the book we follow, is they don't come back to the middle to genuflect, they just simply go to those 2 places and kneel down. Now it's a little different if the Blessed Sacrament is exposed on the altar, like 40 hours, and we would go over that separately. But normally, they would just simply come back to their place, kneel down onto the step. Now, you're going to be on the opposite side of where you were at the beginning of Mass. So now this is acolyte number 1, who started over here, and this is acolyte number 2. The priest will then finish putting the veil on the chalice, finish dressing the chalice, go over to the book, read the communion prayer, come back, kiss the altar, say Dominus Vobiscum, et cum spiritu tuo, go back to the book, read the post-communion prayer, any commemorations, there's Amen, after each time you hear Per omnia saecula saeculorum. And then he'll go back to the middle, kiss the altar, Dominus Vobiscum, and he will either say Ite missa est, most of the time, Or he'll turn back to the altar and say, Benedict Hughes Domino, and for either of those you say, Deo gratias. Or, if it's a Requiem Mass, he will turn back to the altar and say, Requiescant in pace, and you will say, Amen. And then he says a prayer bowed called the Placiat. All right, so after the priest says the Placiat, he gives the blessing, you say Amen. So you're either going to respond Deo gratias to the Ite Missa Est or Benedict Hughes Domino, or you're going to say Amen at a Requiem Mass. Requiescant in pace, Amen. Then he bows, says what's called the Placiat, and he'll give you the blessing. At the end of the blessing, make sure you say Amen. For whatever reason, servers tend to forget that Amen. If it's a Requiem Mass, there's no final blessing. Then after that, he goes to the side and recites the last gospel. The servers will stand and face towards the priest. So this one over here is going to angle towards the priest as he's reciting the last gospel. You have the responses for the last gospel. And here at our church, we have the custom after the priest begins and you sign yourselves and say Gloria Tibi Domine, then this server will go over to the pulpit and get the microphone and bring it to the middle. And this server will go over to the cruet table and get the book with the prayers for after Mass, any books that the priest needs for the prayers that are going to be recited. And then you'll be at your places, standing there. When the priest is done, he will come down here. You will kneel next to him. You have the prayers after Mass. Then he goes up to get the chalice. When he goes up to get the chalice, this server will go over to the priest's chair and get the biretta and come back. Now the servers are standing. The priest comes down. They're standing next to him. They genuflect with him. And the server that had the biretta presents it to the priest in such a way that he can take it by the middle of the three flaps of cloth or horn, as it says in the serving book, that he can take the middle one. So he puts it on his head. This server, so now let me just draw that. You have the priest in the middle. You have server number 2, who's now on this side, who will present the biretta. And you have the other server on this side. You genuflect with the priest, uniform movement. Then this server will come around and go in first, and then followed by this server, and then the priest. So the priest over here will come around and be the first one in, lead you in. You'll go in to the vesting table. The priest sets down his chalice, bows to the main crucifix in the sacristy. You bow with him. Same thing before you go out. You bow with the priest. And then you kneel down, and he'll give you a blessing, and that's your recompense for serving Mass, in addition to the many graces you receive for serving Mass. And then you just help the priest unvest and put away the things for Mass, and make sure you make a proper thanksgiving before you leave.